Okay, before we get into stage 10, let's kind of clarify some things from stage 9. Okay, so quick points here. Roman Bardet, his team is down to only 6 riders, so that might affect Roman Bardet as he now has less riders to support him. Quick Step is leading in the overall team classification, and Movistar is second. I kind of didn't give Taylor Finney full credit for the job that he did on the cobbles in stage 9, and I had noted in my last commentary or comments that Taylor Finney didn't exactly do great. Okay, what I should have remembered is that he was trying to protect Rigoberto Aran, his team leader. And if you recall, Rigoberto, he had crashed and had mechanical issues on stage 9, and he lost quite a bit of time. So it would make sense that because Taylor Finney is supporting him and was trying to help Iran get to the finish line, that would have affected how well Taylor Finney could have finished. So Taylor Finney potentially would have finished much faster with a much better time. So, I have to give him credit for that. Richie Porte, as noted, is out of the Tour de France, but he said he wants to ride in the Volta, basically the Tour of Spain. Here's the catch, though. The team director for BMC hasn't exactly acknowledged that or confirmed that, and here's why, or here's some potential drama. Well, Richie Porte may sign with another team. So if BMC is feeling, not very charitable, they could send another rider to the Volta other than Richie Porte because they don't want to help support Richie Porte potentially winning the Volta and then have him jump to another team where then starting next season he would be BMC's rival. So we'll have to see how that plays out. The other little drama that kind of came out is Bradley Wiggins had tossed out, well, because Geraint Thomas is ahead of Chris Froome in the GC in the Tour de France, what happens if Geraint Thomas gets into yellow? Would that mean that the team would ride to support Geraint Thomas and to help keep him in yellow? Or would the team ride for Chris Froome? And whether or not the team director for Sky is being honest, he said Chris Froome is still the leader. They're not going to switch anything to Geraint Thomas, and they're just going to let things play out on the road, which would make sense. And if at some point Chris Froome and Geraint Thomas are neck and neck, well, then let the best man win. And who knows, maybe Geraint Thomas could win and Chris Froome could come in second, or I could see the potential for Geraint Thomas to be on the podium either in second or third place should Chris Froome repeat as the winner. One quick thing I was wondering about a little bit in watching today's stage, that being stage 10, where the breakaway got out in front of the peloton, and they were around 2 or 3 minutes, and at different points about 5 minutes ahead of the main peloton with Froome and Quintana and Valverde and all those guys in it. The thing I was wondering is here's kind of the weird part where maybe teams and athletes actually work together to manage the overall way that the consumer, meaning the spectators, participate in enjoying the sport of cycling. Okay, what do I mean? Okay, well, even though, let's say, in the NBA, players are rivals and players are trying to beat each other, they want the league to do well because then that benefits them. It helps them with future salaries. It helps them with their agents, so then their agents get a bigger cut when they help negotiate that player's new contract. It helps the sponsors. It helps the networks. That makes the networks more willing to pay more money the next time that they bid to cover something like the NBA. Okay, so what do I mean for the peloton and cycling? Okay, take today's stage 10 where they're hitting the mountains. Let's say the peloton pushed a harder pace. One, they catch the breakaway, so that disincentivizes any people wanting to get in the breakaway to try to get a little individual glory. That diminishes the sport. That discourages riders. Potentially people then don't want to go into cycling, or viewers and spectators turn off their televisions or stop reading coverage of the sport of cycling, because they go, oh, who cares? The peloton controls everything. Only the two or three strongest riders will win. I don't care anymore. Okay, the second reason is, okay, let's say the peloton rode really hard right from the get-go. They would drop so many of the sprinters and the heavier, stronger riders that do really well on the flats. Those riders would potentially get swept out of the race by not finishing within that percentage of the winner, where they come in too slow. So in other words, imagine a scenario like here in stage 10, the peloton goes balls out, they push it really hard. One, so now no breakaways, no one, thinks they can win the stage. So that discourages that kind of action and, competition. And then two, let's say just at a stage 10, let's say like 5 riders got eliminated for coming in too slow. And then if that happened again tomorrow and another 5 or 6 riders got eliminated, already by the third day in the mountain, let's say all the sprinters could have been gone. So now there's no true sprinters left to compete for stage wins as we go into the second and then the final week of the tour. Do you kind of see what I'm saying? So it's kind of like this is where, there's a little wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Hey, let's not push it. Let's not burn ourselves out. And by the way, if we push it too hard now, it will diminish how much we can do in the Pyrenees or later on in the Alps tomorrow and then on Thursday. So there's a little bit, I think, of conserving energy to keep the race interesting, to make sure that the sprinters stay in the race until the end. It's so that they can be there in Paris and race on the Champs-Élysées, and then to allow for breakaways and individual riders that will never compete for GC, somebody that's 20, 30, 40 minutes down on the GC, but that can go out and get individual glory by winning that day's stage. And yet if Team Sky rode as hard as they can really ride, if all the strongest riders rode as hard as they could ride, basically the race by the end of the second week would be down to, maybe 60, 70 riders, and everybody else would just say, screw it. Going into stage 10, it basically is 158 kilometers, so about 90 miles. It went over a category 4, a category 1, a horse category, and then 2 category 1s, and then had a downhill descent to the finish. So things to keep in mind, the downhill, that kind of eliminates being able to go balls out to the mountaintop finish. So somebody like Chris Froome, I think today was more of a day of, testing the legs, assessing your competition, seeing how strong your rivals are, and then, maybe gaining a little bit of time or eliminating some people out of GC contention. Something like a true mountaintop finish, that's where the strongest riders can go right to the finish line. And that's where, if they get 100, 200, 300 meters ahead of their rivals, they can immediately gain 20, 30, 40 seconds on them. The advantage of the downhill finish is riders that get dropped going over that, the mountain pass, the top of the mountain, they potentially can catch up by the bottom, and or it allows for riders who are willing to take greater risk on the downhill. They can get 5, 10, 15 seconds ahead of riders who were with them going over the top, who then are not as confident or as willing to take risk or are just not as skillful at descending at higher speeds. Okay, to give you an idea then how the stage went, so they started the stage at about 1,500 feet elevation. And then their first climb up that category 4 was about a 500-foot climb up to about 2,000 feet elevation. Then they descended down a bit, and then they climbed up to category 1. They climbed about 2,800 feet up to about 4,900 feet elevation. And that was a 6-mile climb. Then they dropped about 2,500 feet. They descended down to the next valley, crossed that valley. Then they had a 3.6 mile or so climb up the horse category, and that was about a 2,200 foot climb up to about 4,500, 4,600 feet. Then they dropped about 2,900 feet down to the valley, down to about 1,600 feet. And then they kicked it up again about 2,600, 2,700 feet to about 4,300 feet elevation. And then I would say they had about another 400-foot drop, just a little quick drop to the valley before going up the final climb, which was that was about a 4-mile, 4.5-mile climb up to 5,300, 5,400 feet before descending down to about 3,100 feet at the finish, which was about a 2,300-foot drop. And the second to the last climb was about 5.4 miles, and then the last climb was about 4 miles. So to kind of give you an idea, so it was a 6-mile climb, 3.5, 4-mile climb, a 5.5-mile climb, and then another 4-mile climb. Let's see, Peter Sagan, he jumped out at the beginning of the stage to make sure that he could get his sprint points, and he was out there with the breakaway for about half the race, and then he pretty much faded. Greg Van Avermaet did a great job trying to defend his yellow jersey. He was out there with the breakaway in front of the main core peloton for most of the race. And then with 2 mountains to go, those last 2 category 1s, he finally pretty much cracked and faded. And, you could tell he was trying to go for the stage win, but he just didn't have it. But he was able to keep himself in yellow for one more day. But you figure this is it. He did a great job defending. He fought to the end, but Greg Van Avermaet, doubtful that he'll be able to keep the yellow after today. To start the day's stage, to give you an idea where some of the riders are at that are not in the top 10. So Nairo Quintana is about a minute 8, minute 10 behind Chris Froome at the beginning of today's stage 10. Romain Bardet is about 50 seconds behind Chris Froome, and Dan Martin is about a minute 36, minute 40 behind Chris Froome. Otherwise, you have Geraint Thomas is 43 seconds behind the yellow. Philippe Gilbert was 44 seconds. Bob Jungels 50 seconds down. Alejandro Valverde a minute 31. Rafael Majka a minute 32. Jakob Fuglsang a minute 33. Then Chris Froome at a minute 42 down to the yellow as of the beginning of stage 10. Adam Yates a minute 42 and Mikel Landa a minute 42. So Quintana is a minute 8 after that core. And then, like I said, Bardet 50 seconds behind, and then Dan Martin a minute 36 behind Chris Froome's time. Okay, so going over the first King of the Mountain, that first category 1, that was worth 10 points for first place. The horse category, that's worth 20 points. So to kind of get you an idea. So a French guy, Millard, he made it over first of that first category 1, so he got himself 10 points. So he had the King of the Mountain jersey. But Julian Alaphilippe was right there, got himself out in front of the core peloton, got himself up there in the breakaway group with Van Avermaet, and at one point, Philippe Gilbert was out there, Common John was out there, Robert Gesink was out there, Tony Galopin, the Frenchman, he was out there, and even De Gent. Okay, but little by little, by that horse category, things started to crack. So Julian Alaphilippe made it over the King of the Mountain of the horse category. That pretty much put him into the King of the Mountain jersey or very close to it. That being said, Julian Alaphilippe was the strongest. He was looking the best. He made it over the second to the last category 1, got the King of the Mountain there. And then he made it over the last category 1 and got the King of the Mountain there. So Julian Alaphilippe, King of the Mountain polka dot jersey. The Estonian, Tammerney, he was leading as well with Julian Alaphilippe, but Julian Alaphilippe pretty much dropped him. He just wasn't strong enough. And to give you an idea, that Tammerney and Julian Alaphilippe, they were together going up the second to the last climb. And then Julian Alaphilippe basically dropped him and then dropped him on the descent and got like 15 or 20 seconds, ahead of him on the descent. So you could totally see Alaphilippe feeling good, diving into the corners, going as quickly as he could. The other guy, the Estonian, holding back, leaning back, going in to the turns much slower, and you could tell he just wasn't comfortable. So even if he tried to hang with Alaphilippe, he just dropped him on the downhill. The main group of the peloton, as they were going up that last climb, the category one, and then had a little downhill and then a little short valley, and then going up that last category one, Bob Jungels started to crack and get dropped. Rigoberto Urán started to crack. Ralph A. Micah started to crack, and Balka Mollema started to crack. So the catch is, can they close that gap on the last descent, that last downhill, or how much time could they lose? So Dan Martin put on a little attack the last kilometer or so, got a little bit ahead, but pretty much Froome and Quintana and Valverde and all those guys caught up to him on the descent. So when they came in on the finish line, that core came in together. So Valverde, Quintana, Dan Martin, Dumoulin, Chris Froome, Geraint Thomas, that core in good shape. However, Rafa Micah, 53 seconds lost to that core. Balka Mollema, also 53 seconds, and Bob Jungels, 53 seconds. So they already have lost about a minute. Rigoberto Urán, something's not right with him. Maybe he's injured or he just doesn't have it this year. He lost another 2 minutes and 30 seconds. So he came in even after Micah and Mollema and those guys who were 53 seconds down. He lost another 2:30 on the Chris Froome Quintana group. Looking into tomorrow, it's a mountaintop finish, and then Alpe d'Huez is coming up the day after that. Take it easy.